Hey, in this video we're going to talk about three great tools that Lightroom gives us to make selective edits to our photos. When you first start out post-processing images, you tend to focus on the whole photo. You make big sweeping changes across the entire frame. As you get a little more seasoned though, your edits start to get a little bit more refined. Instead of making these global changes, you start making certain edits to only parts of the image independent of the rest of it. Lightroom gives us three tools to help better define the areas where we want our edits to affect while leaving the other areas alone. We're going to talk about three of these tools that are grouped together called the targeted adjustment tools. Specifically, they are the graduated filter, the radial filter, and the adjustment brush. It's pretty natural to talk about the three of these targeted adjustment tools together because they kind of do the same thing. They're essentially different ways to select and define or target the specific areas we want to make our edits. Once we selected an area, we can then get to access pretty much all the tools from the Lightroom basic panel to edit it. This image is a good example where we might think about using some targeted adjustments. It's got a wide dynamic range happening with some really big kind of bright highlights here and just a bright sky mixed with really some really dark stuff in these the bridge, the skyline, these foreground rocks, and it's even really got some mid-tones here. So it's just got a lot of different things happening in a lot of different places, and I feel like maybe global adjustments are gonna kind of wreck something when we're trying to fix something else. So let's see what we can do though. First, we'll go through the Lightroom basic panel and see if we can. I'm all for making things simple, so let's see if we can get away with just using that. So, first things first, look up the histogram. It looks underexposed, really. Looks a little too far to the left, don't have much going on over here. There's a little touch of highlights, but let's just go ahead and up the exposure a little bit. That's too far, but maybe somewhere around here. Rocks look better, bridge is starting to look better, skyline looks better, but my sky is just ruined now. Not liking that at all. So next thing we'll do, we'll just go to the highlights, see if we can pull that back, see if we can fix it. So already that's pretty good. We got our color back. We're liking our sky now. I'm still liking the rocks down here now. So the one thing though is I wish I had a little bit more definition in the bridge part, like underneath here. So what if we maybe go and now we'll pull a little bit of shadow out of there. So let's do that. So bridge better. Rocks, I'm not liking that. I'm finding them a little bit too bright now. So this is kind of where I start to pull back and say, yeah, I'm not loving like the whole thing overall. Like is a little bit looks a little bit too flat now. So I think I step back and maybe we'll deal with these elements individually. So what I kind of do next is I break down the image into the parts that I see. Let's put this back to where it was. Let's bring this guy back and we'll reset all these back to where we were. So first we've got our sky, obviously, and then we've got our skyline and our bridge. And then the water in between here. That's a good kind of element to break everything up. And then finally we've got these foreground rocks. Let's go ahead and use the targeted adjustment tools to tackle these elements individually. First off, let's talk about the graduated filter. The graduated filter is typically known as the sky darkener tool, which is pretty appropriate because it's based on a physical graduated filter that you stick in front of the lens of your camera to balance exposures, most often between, say, a bright sky and darker land. It's really a lot more versatile than just darkening your skies, though. Like I mentioned earlier, when you use any of these tools, you actually get access to pretty much the whole basic panel for all of them. So it's not just limited to up and down for the exposure. You get all of these sliders and you can use any or all of them if you want. It's also not limited to just pulling down to get your sky. You could pull it from the side or up from the bottom on a diagonal, whatever you want. They're all available. So to use the graduated filter, you'll click on the tool on the bar, and then you drag it down from whatever edge you're looking for the effect to kind of cover. This center line is really where you're going to get pretty much the maximum effect is going to go to. And these outer lines are where it's going to kind of gradually fade off and blend into the rest of the image. The wider you make it go, the more it's going to blend. One quick tip for using the graduated filter is if you want it to come, rather than just kind of go like this, if you want it to come down in a straight line, you hold the shift key and then drag down, and it'll kind of keep a nice level line for you then. A second really good tip with these adjustments is right down below the image, there's this box called Show Selected Mask Overlay. Check this box and it'll now kind of cover up in red where the tool is going to affect the most. So it's right now, this solid red is going to affect all here. It's going to kind of come right to here, and then it's kind of just fading in. So the lighter it gets, the less it's going to affect your image. So I'm going to delete this and we're going to use it here in our image. So I'm gonna check my box here, and then I'm gonna grab it and pull it down from the top and bring it pretty much level with my horizon here. This is looks a little, it isn't level, but the skyline kind of drifts off to the right, so it's level, but it kind of gives that perception that it's not. So anyway, so this is where we're gonna go. I want it to kind of fade in pretty quickly because I've got a pretty hard edge here. And so I'm going to drop it right there, and that looks good to me. Once you start using it, I check this box when I'm putting the filter on, but then when I go to my edits, I take it off so I can see what's actually happening. So in our case, if we think back, we're pretty happy with our sky. We don't really want to darken that down too much, but what we were really looking at is we wanted to pull some of it, kind of get a little more texture underneath of this bridge, maybe the skyline, see a little bit of more of that. So we're not going to go exposure. We're not going to go anything else. We're going to hit the highlights right away. So we're going to slide this over to the right to just kind of reveal a little bit. So there we start to see, not too far, not too crazy or anything like that, but now we get to see kind of what's underneath the bridge. Not going too bright because then it'll start looking a little unnatural. Maybe my sky, I'm kind of thinking about it a little bit. Maybe my sky is a little bright, but I don't think I'm going to drop the exposure. I think it's just the bright parts that are kind of too bad. So a good way for that is to grab your highlights and slide that down. And yeah, that's kind of nice. It's kind of giving a little more contrast. I'm getting a little more color in this kind of band of yellow just right here. So that's good. I feel good about that. It's made some changes up here. Hasn't affected my rocks like doing the global adjustments did. However, now I kind of want to deal with my rocks. You could just kind of go and grab since I said you could kind of go on the diagonal, you could grab your filter and go right up here. I'll hit my checkbox to see where it's affecting, and it's pretty good, but it is kind of bleeding into the water here, and I really just kind of want to select the rocks themselves. So what are we going to do about that? Lightroom actually does give us a little bit of a tool where we can kind of refine this a little bit further. It's right up here, right beside the new and edit below these, but in the kind of, once you have it selected, this brush. So if you select that, it lets you kind of add. Right now we're going to add because right in the center of that thing, it's circled, it's a plus. So that means it's going to brush more on. I want it to erase, so I can go over to the erase here, and now it's a minus. And then I can kind of erase away the stuff I don't want it to affect. I find the eraser is actually way more useful than adding here. I would kind of, if I was going to do it, and I'll show you why here in a sec, because this kind of works out pretty well. I got it pretty good. See, so I'm just kind of affecting my rocks, and I'm not really affecting my water. So that's much better already. So to see the effect in the opposite direction, though, I'm just going to back up a couple steps and get my whole thing back in place. So if I was to go here and add on, you see where it's kind of graduating in, where it's blending in like this. If you go right here, it's a solid red. So it's not, you're losing all that graduated part of it. So it just doesn't work quite as well. So really, so I'll take my filter, make sure it covers the whole area if I'm going to do it this way, and then erase out the parts I don't really want. So that was, like I said, that was pretty good, but there's actually kind of a better tool maybe to look at doing these rocks with. So we're going to look at that next. So I'm just going to delete this away, and then we'll move on to the next tool. So that next tool we're going to look at is the adjustment brush. It's this one way over on the far right of this toolbar. So We just click it like the other one. We'll check our box here with show selected mask overlay. And then we just start painting into our rocks. If you have a scrolling mouse, you can actually increase or decrease the size of the mouse by scrolling up and down. If you hit shift, if you hold the shift key while you scroll up and down, you can adjust the feather of the brush. So the feather you can kind of think of as like those outer bars of the graduated filter. They'll go from that hard edge and kind of just fade it in a little bit softer into the rest of it. So let's paint over our rocks. Get in here, we'll kind of decrease it some, get it in. So that's pretty good, but like, so with the brush, it's better than the graduated filter, but we still kind of run into some of the same problems. It's right these picky little areas here where we start to kind of hit right the edges of our irregular kind of shaped rocks. We're bleeding into the water. So you can still do it, like you can kind of make it bigger, you can put your eraser on and then just kind of start to erase it out the stuff you want, and if you can fine tune it and everything like that, but this kind of takes a while, and Lightroom actually has a better way to do that with the adjustment brush. So let's just delete this away. We'll delete the whole thing, we'll start a new one, and we're gonna, so the better way to do it is really hitting this little box down here in the brush kind of controls called auto mask. What this does is it kind of uses some smarts and it kind of intelligently tries to figure out what you're doing, what you're painting over, and just kind of hit the boundary of that and then not go over. So in our case, we're going to hopefully get these rocks and then not the water. So we'll check that box. We'll start painting over our stuff now. And as you see, kind of it's fading. It's not getting everything now. It's kind of starting to try to figure out what we're doing. So sometimes I actually don't even turn on this mask. I'll get the big parts. I want this. I want all these rocks. I want everything in there for there. And then when I start to get to my edges, I'll hit this auto mask, and then I kind of get into the edge, and now if I go up there, see, it kind of just hits the rocks. It's not really doing the water now, so I get up here, I get my water, and I'm just getting my rocks. I'm not really bleeding into the water as much, so it's already way better. It's not perfect, but it's much better. So then what you can do is you can just go hit your eraser and then erase away. The auto mask works just as well for the eraser. You have to turn it on again, but if you kind of get in here, if I go in, oh, it's just getting that. So it's just erasing this water parts away. And this kind of makes a better selection, and it's way faster. So I'm just going to clean it up a little bit here, get rid of these guys, get rid of that. And so now, same as the other one, once I'm done making my selection, I'm happy with it. It's got kind of everything I need here. Maybe I'll get this little, oops, that's a mistake there. I'll go back to my eraser or my paintbrush and then paint that in. And so now, good, I'm going to uncheck my box here to show my overlay. So now I can get to see my edits. So these rocks, I can see they're kind of lost in shadow. I'm losing a bunch of shadow. So first thing I'll do is I'll pull up my shadows, but now I kind of get to control it. I don't have to, I had gone up higher up here, and now I just want 28, a little bit better. I might bump up, I said I wasn't going to do it, but maybe I'll bump up the exposure just a little bit, not too crazy or anything like that. I think that's already too much. Maybe I'll drop down my shadows and then just a touch. You're just kind of doing light edits, not to be too crazy, but just kind of bring them out of the shadow. The other thing I think I want to kind of do here is these are rocks and they're all sorts of just different like edges and textures and everything like that. So I actually want to emphasize some of that texture. So Lightroom has this great slider for that. It's called texture. It does exactly kind of what you think it is. So if you just crank it way up, you see, oh, that texture. That's a little too far. So I'm just going to kind of just dilate it a little bit, get some of this. If you go too far, you kind of pull the eye completely here. I don't want to do that. I just want to kind of just bring out those textures just a little touch. So there, rocks. So you can see your adjustments. If you go down to the bottom, you can see on, off. So that made some nice changes. It's not anything too crazy, nothing too dramatic, but just kind of brought it out. So, that being said, I really probably could have pulled off these rocks because they're down on the edge and they're down right here. I probably could have pulled this off with a graduated filter. That's not always the case though. You might have something like, say, this water up here that's not to an edge, so I can't just pull it up because I'd have to erase all this stuff out, and it's kind of a huge hassle at that point. So I do want to affect my water a little bit. I want to make completely different changes though than these rocks. So I'm going to go up here, hit new. So now I've got a brand new brush. I've got the plus in the center there, just like before. So now I know I'm applying the filter rather than erasing it. I'm going to turn off my auto mask just to get kind of my big broad strokes in there. Oops, I usually turn this on just so I can see what's happening. You can turn it on after, it doesn't affect it or anything like that. I don't really love how I did that there though, so I'm just going to kind of get here. So it's not working, so let's go ahead. Let's turn that auto mask on, see what it does. So now you see it's actually way smarter in that it knows I don't really want the rocks that are holding up the pillar there. I just want the water. So it's getting it in here. So when I'm doing this, oftentimes what I'll do is I will kind of like paint in my big broad strokes at the beginning, and then I let go on my mouse. I not let go, but I unclick it, and then I start doing my fine tuning. So then if I got to go way out of whack here, something do that or slip or something like that, I can just Control Z. It doesn't erase the whole kind of mask. It's just erasing my last brush stroke. So let's just finish this off. Let's get in here. And with my auto mask, it's doing a pretty nice job, like avoiding these rocks. You don't really want to paint over still because it's still trying to, like, so you still kind of want to sort of go around them, but it's smarter around the edges. So I'm going to do some filter, get that filled in. Great, that's looking pretty good. I kind of want this little area right here, and I want to. You might notice. So one thing I just did here too. I switched from the brush to the eraser without actually going over here and changing it. That's another keyboard shortcut. So if you hold the Alt key while using the tool, it'll flip back and forth between the brush and the eraser. So this way I'm on brush, so without it is brush. If I hit Alt, it's eraser. If I were to switch over this way, it knows primarily it's eraser, and if I press the Alt, it's the paintbrush itself. So I'm going to just go back over to my paintbrush because that's what I'm trying to do. I'm just going to fill in this last little section up here, and great. Okay. So I'm going to unselect that. So my water, what do I want to do with that? What was my goal here? I was kind of like, I like the less kind of like, I like this smooth, silky kind of water, but at 1/8 of a second, it did that naturally, but I kind of want to enhance that effect a little bit. I want to give it kind of less texture, if anything. So what I'm going to do there, I'm going to go to my texture slider, and I'm actually going to go the opposite way, maybe down to about here. Not too crazy, like I don't want it that. I just want to just come some take down some of those edges, I guess. Is there anything else I want to do there? I kind of wish everything else is kind of bright and bold or black and really kind of stands out, where my water doesn't as much. I think I wanted to give it just a little hint more of a pop. So I think I'm going to throw some saturation into that just to kind of bring it out, just to kind of mirror my sky a little bit more. I think that's good. So if you go on and off, it's really nothing too crazy in the water at all. It's just a little effect. I might actually add a little bit of clarity to my water, give it a little punch, maybe a little bit of contrast in there. Maybe not. So anyway, so I feel good. So that's where the adjustment brush kind of comes in handy. It's more when you want to paint around some stuff, or you might have there might have been some sort of pool in here of water or something like that, a puddle or something that you want to go around it. That's where the adjustment brush really kind of comes in better than a graduated filter in that instance. So I'm looking pretty good overall. There's one last thing, is I'd really like to kind of deal with my bridge. It's really kind of fiddly to get in with a brush for that though, and I kind of just want to highlight my bridge a little bit more, because really it is the subject. All this stuff, it was a great night, but the rocks aren't the subject, the water's not the subject, even the sky is not the subject. That's the bridge. So we've got one more tool to use for that. So I'm going to hit done on this. The other tool is the one we kind of skipped over up here. It's the radial filter. So the radial filter, the easiest way to kind of think about that is if you were to go down, so getting away from that, if you were to go down to effects here and you wanted to put a vignette on your image, we often do, which I probably will. But the thing about a vignette is it's always out from the edges right to the middle. There's no other way to kind of roll that with that tool. That's just how it works. So what the radial filter, when they introduce that, the most useful use of that is it kind of lets you put a vignette in that's more off center somewhere else if you want to highlight it something else. So it works, you just kind of click on it. It works the same as everything else, the other two tools, and you drag it and you'll make kind of like an oval or a circle. So we wanted to highlight our bridge, so we'd kind of make it, and you can drag it out this way. And so there it's kind of got that whole bridge area selected and nothing else. But what's the problem here? Right now what it's going to do is it's going to affect everything but my bridge. So whatever I do, I could do it that way. I could just kind of drop the exposure across the board. I'm going to turn this off so we can see what's happening. Drop the exposure across the board. So it'll darken everything but my bridge. It's kind of that off center thing. That's great. And then I'd go ahead and up and then turn off the filter and then go to my regular basic panel and up the exposure, and that kind of would do it. I kind of I think I usually use this tool the opposite way. So there's a little checkbox down here that says invert. So I'm going to show you how it works. So I'm already kind of, that other way was kind of a two-step process. I've already got the rest of my exposure I'm already pretty happy with. The only thing I'm really interested in is affecting this bridge. So I'm going to turn this back on. And so how would I affect the bridge? I'm just going to invert it. So now the only thing I'm affecting is what's inside my oval. So that looks much better. So I'm going to grab that, and now I'm just going to increase the exposure. So that's what I want. I don't know if I want to go. So it kind of, and it's got a feather just like everything else. So this works like those other feathers. So how hard an edge you kind of want to go. Usually it's pretty good right at the default halfway. And I think I'm going to pull out my shadows a little bit more. And let's see what that did for an effect. So it's nothing big. We're never doing kind of big eds, but it just kind of brings that bridge out a little bit more. So that's the radial filter, and that's usually kind of the process I follow going through this. I start with my sky, then I do some individual adjustments as necessary, and then I kind of often give my subject a little pop of brightness with the radial filter. So the last thing we're going to do, we're going to hit done to this, and we're going to talk about a couple advanced things with these filters. They've done a lot so far, but they sort of recently introduced, maybe a year or two ago, a couple extra things that you can do to kind of control these a little bit better. So the way I'm going to show you is via the graduated tool, but like everything else here, they all kind of work the same. So I'm going to actually pick on this guy right here. So I'm going to highlight it and show it in red. So I'm affecting everything. What if I really liked my sky, but I really just only wanted to deal with my bridge? It's hard to do that anyway. Like, it's hard to do it with these tools. Like, you could brush it in, but that would take you forever and it would be very fiddly. So it's not really the best way to kind of do it. Ideally, I could just pull it down like this and affect my shadows just on their own, or maybe the brightness, whatever the case may be. But this case, I really just want to deal with these shadows in here, these darker areas, and I want to leave my sky alone. So what they introduced a couple of years ago in Lightroom is this range mask. So what range masks kind of do is the luminance one in particular, it works a lot like a luminosity mask or something in Photoshop. It's more probably maybe it's a little less refined, so it's more like a luminosity mask light. But oftentimes that's all you really need. So the way that works is it's got its own little button to show how it's going to affect. So right now, this is how you decide. This is the darks. This is kind of removing the darks. this is removing the light. So what you do is you can check this box to show luminosity mask. So it's showing just where it's affecting. In this case, it kind of marks in dark what it's not affecting, and red is everything that it is affecting. So if I pull it this way, right now, so the red is all I'm going to affect. So I'm only going to affect my sky. That's not what I want it to do. I want it to do the opposite. So I'm going to pull from this side, the bright end, and drag it down. So now that's looking pretty good. I'm only going to affect this, which is actually, this is pretty good really, because I really want to affect the bridge way more than I want to affect this, because I'm going to take this off, and I'm just going to pull up my exposure for just that bridge. So now it's kind of a more refined dealing with just my bridge stuff versus dealing with the whole thing. Hope that makes sense. So basically it's just select it, check this box, and then kind of removing the bright stuff is from the right, removing the darks is from the left. And you can even actually, you could pull both of them. Like, so if you just wanted to deal with your midtones, you could pull it from both ends, and away you go. One kind of weird kind of advanced trick about the graduated filter is that you can actually use it to kind of cheat a little bit. So one thing you can do is let's get a new one, and you can pull it right off the board. Oh, let me delete that one, and then do the shift trick and pull it right down and completely right off my image. So if I hit this now, it's going to affect the whole thing. So you kind of think, well, why would you ever really want to do that? What I can do now, in conjunction with my range mask, I could turn on luminance, and now if I go this way, I check my box. If I go this way, I can now make some adjustments to only the darker areas across the entire image. There's no other real way to do that in Lightroom. If you used to have to take that into Photoshop and use some complicated luminosity masks or something like that. But now if you do this, you can do that. You could do it to the brights just as easily. So if you just wanted to affect your brights, you drag it that way. And now I'm going to affect all of these brights across. And I mean, they're still brights even though they're in here. So you just kind of go more and more, and the more you get. So now I'm really just going to affect the sky and the brightest parts of this water. So that's that. I hope that helps. I hope that's kind of demystified a little bit the targeted adjustment tools. If you have any feedback or questions, please leave it in the comments. Thanks.